Hello, everybody, and welcome to Evidence, the Evolution Show, Episode 5, the Artificial Selection episode. I almost said agriculture something episode. Well, I guess we should call it the agriculture episode because artificial selection is so important to agriculture. But yes, today we are continuing the long tradition of spending all of my life talking about all the evidence supporting evolution because I told Kent Hovind that you could do that, and he said, well, then go do it. And I said, okay, Kent, I will, damn you, I will.
You won't live long enough, Austin.
Nobody cares about
You won't
this
live
stuff.
long enough to go through all the evidence of evolution. There's
No,
many evidence of evolution.
That was my point, Ian, is that I could do it my whole life and still not get to all of it. Yeah.
Well, Kent definitely won't live long enough. That's for sure. He's what, 70 issues old?
Right. Yeah.
Susceptible to strokes and whatnot.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, especially if he's blowing a gasket over his fourth wife leaving. But I guess we don't have to get into that.
Oh no, I hadn't heard that. You've got to do a second debate with Austin.
Get Karisu to tell you about it, because I'm sure he would love to talk at length about.
I follow him enough. I follow him enough to. Oh, I've lost my camera. How does that happen? Oh shit! So let me just try to fix up my camera.
No problem. There you go. You're back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I hadn't heard that. But anyway, that aside, you should do a second debate with him. I really enjoyed your first one.
I reached out to Donnie.
You know how he dished out button. You reached out. Good, because you now experience what he's like. You know how he tries to change the topic and stuff. So you're now better informed and you're better experienced, and you can probably attack it better. So I personally, and I think a lot of people would love to see a second debate. You should. And I'm glad you're doing it, but definitely do it.
Yeah, I reached out to Donnie. He wants to do a discussion on specific ancestry. Waiting to hear back from him on that, and then we'll schedule that. And then I also said I would be interested in debating Kent again, and I even offered a couple of ideas for specific topics to do. Like I said, we could do micro versus macro evolution. We could do one that I wanted to do was the goo to zoo to you argument that creationists talk about a lot. I thought we could have a whole argument about that, specifically about.
You might have to explain to me, Austin, later what the difference between micro and macro evolution is, because as you know, to an evolutionist, there is no difference. It's just a matter of scale.
Correct. That is the absolute limit of their use as terms. Is just saying a small amount of evolution versus a large amount. That is the whole scope
that
of their
would be
use.
A good one. It was something I brought up with Ken, and he couldn't answer it. But if you spend a whole debate talking about it, and you start off with the micro and the macro, and then Ken will go to, yes, but there are limits, and then just go, well, show me a limit. Like, what are these limits? So he won't be able to explain it. So it would be a good one if you kind of do a specific debate on that. You'll catch him out.
That's what the goo to zoo to you one is. It's have you ever heard that creationist argument before?
I think they all do. Like Eric Hovind says it a lot. I think I've heard him say it a few times.
Yeah. So I actually, we kind of touched on that a little bit in that first debate we did, where we ended up talking about algae, how algae can go not only from microscopic monocellular to non-microscopic. Like it's an example of exactly the goo to zoo idea, that it goes from a monocellular organism to a multicellular colony to a multicellular colony so large it can be seen without the aid of instruments. Like that is major macro evolution. That's exactly what we would call macro evolution. So, and all the different topics would kind of interweave with each other, which is part of how one of the reasons you can't go over evidence of evolution, because you can't go over all of it. It's changing all the time too. other disciplines now substantiate evolution almost as much as biology does. Like, I was pretty surprised to find out that volcanology has a lot of support for evolution. Ian, I'm still looking for a volcanologist who's willing to talk to me about that.
Yeah. Oh, there's a guy called geez, I can't remember his name. Like a couple of the YouTube channels have it on. He's fantastic when he comes talking about geology. He's actually he's got a PhD in paleoclimatology. Like he looks at ancient climates, but he can speak to a lot of the geological stuff. He's been on Aaron Ra's channel. He's been on like Gutsy Gibb. He's been on a few channels. I think his name is Jonathan Baker. So is it Jonathan Baker?
Jonathan Baker?
Yeah, he can get like. Yeah, he's quite open to coming onto people's channels, and he's totally debunked the Mount St. Helens. Like, he talks through the rocks and stuff as to why it's completely wrong. Like, why it's a very bad example for creationists to use when they compare it to the Grand Canyon. So he talks about that, but he knows a lot about volcanoes and all that kind of stuff as well. So he's not a volcanologist, but he has a lot of knowledge about geology. But his specific degree is on paleoclimatology.
Jonathan Baker, you said.
I think it's Jonathan Baker. I could be. Let me see.
I'll check into that. Hey, what's up, Hill Hugger? Yeah, no, I realized too late that the idea for this show has very, very limited appeal, because pretty much everybody who accepts evolution, they don't really need to spend their whole life poring over the evidence for evolution, right? Like, unless they're going to be biologists themselves, they don't really need to know all the evidence for evolution and how science has substantiated evolution and how those understandings might change based on some obscure field's discoveries, you know? But I'm going to do it anyways, because why not? You know, it's time I would be spending just playing video games anyways. So it's a chance to learn new things for me. And now I am actually in school for biology, so this stuff does help me somewhat. So, you know what? Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was a lot of work to get back into school for me, because I had dropped out previously, and they were like, "Oh, you know, we're not sure we want to take you back."
What I like about you, Austin, is that you've gone back to school. We were talking a little bit about this backstage, guys, in the audience. What I kind of admire about Austin is he went back to school for his love of knowledge. So, I mean, I reckon, Austin, you know a lot about this stuff anyway. Like, you're obviously reading up on it, and just by listening to some of the shows that you've been doing in the past, you obviously have quite a good grasp of the knowledge. But when I was speaking to Austin before, he was talking about going back to school to learn about it formally. And I think the quest and the appetite to want to learn, I think that's what I admire most about you, Austin. And I think you made the comment that you want to learn everything. You want to learn chemistry, physics, biology, all that kind of stuff, which is great. And I think I did say, Austin, that I don't think you have enough years in your lifetime to learn everything. So maybe pick a couple that you want to specialize in. But yeah, your enthusiasm for knowledge is yes.
You know what? It's hard to even find some of these things. I was looking for volcanology courses. Where can you take volcanology courses? Pretty much only in Hawaii, I think.
You know, just going to that comment that you made earlier around volcanology and how it kind of disproves a young Earth. It kind of reminds me of another channel. I don't know if you guys in the audience have heard of Dr. Joel Duff. He's a Christian, but yes. He's a Christian that does not accept the young Earth, right? So he accepts the science. He's a professor in he's a doctor. I don't know exactly what his degree is. It's in some sort of biology field, but it could be evolutionary biology or whatnot. I should know this, but he's a PhD. He's a professor of biology. He's very well educated, but he has this knack of really looking at these kind of talked about sciences that we don't normally talk about that disprove a young Earth. And he's currently going through a 12-part series on the Dead Sea, and he's looking at all the elements of the Dead Sea that prove that it cannot be a young Earth. And he really looks into all these little details that the creationists don't think about. So when you talk to creationists, they always bring out Grand Canyon, they bring out, you know, all these kind of the normal talking points that all of them talk about. But Dr. Joel Duff goes into the minute detail on stuff they don't talk about that proves a young Earth is impossible. And when you talk about volcanology, that's one of those topics. Like people don't normally talk about that and why this proves a young Earth. That's why I think that would be interesting. But
Yeah.
Dr. Joel Duff does that really well as well. So for all of you guys who don't know him, follow him, subscribe to him. He really goes through all the sciences that we don't think about, but then really emphasizes how every science disproves the young Earth.
So I'm working on something for a future episode. I'm gonna do an evidence of evolution YouTube episode where I'm gonna put together a list of 100 YouTubers that I like on different subjects, and Joel Duff is definitely going on there. He is for sure one of the great YouTube resources of evolutionary science. I'm not sure what his specific field is. If I were going to take a guess, I would think it's probably ornithology, because he talks about birds a lot. He knows a ton about birds. His knowledge of birds is
and dogs, though. He talks about canines, and he talks about a lot of stuff. I know it's biology related. I just don't know the exact field, and I kick myself because I should know this, but it doesn't come to mind now.
Yeah, I would love to get him on this channel for this specific stream, the evidence stream, and just get him talking about his favorite evidence for evolution. Oh yeah, guys, we didn't even do the thing that's the theme of the show. Everybody's got to post their favorite evidence of evolution in the chat, at least one of their favorite pieces, I guess. I cheat and I do all of it. It's all my favorite. Haha. I subsume your paradigm. But yes. Steve Bauman, Spooky Bed Hair says, is a geologist guy. This is why I've got notes now for when I do this stream. Steve Bauman, geologist.
No, I haven't heard of him.
Spooky Bed Hair is my my trivia rival, so I trust their recommendation.
Right. No, I'll have to look him up. Have I heard of him? I don't think I've heard of him. So I will definitely look him up. Steve Bauman. Okay.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about artificial selection a little bit today. We got a couple of people watching, so I figured we'll get started on that. And I figured we'll start it off the easy way. I got a nice YouTube video that sums it up pretty well for us to react to. What do you say, Ian?
Good. Yeah, do it. Let's do it.
Right. Share screen. Artificial selection and selective breeding. And now this video starts off with a very unfortunate pause frame here. It's not their best look. But
artificial selection has given us this, and this, and this, and most importantly, this. But what exactly is artificial selection? Who is doing the selecting, and what are they selecting for? I'm at the grocery store doing some shopping for tomatoes. There's a lot of options. So which of these would you buy? This one or this one? This one, of course. It just looks better overall. Now,
and just let me know if you want me to pause this, Ian, if you have any comments you want to make, because I feel free to just shout out. And I immediately have a comment here. This is one of the reasons I think this evidence is very trustworthy for evolution, because people have to get this crap right to make sure they get that maximum money, bro. Making good looking tomatoes that sell, that people look at and they say, I want to fucking eat the shit out of that tomato, is part of how people make their livelihood. So the science that they trust has to get that shit right.
Is it worth maybe you, Austin, maybe just delving a little bit as to what sits behind these traits? That I just wonder whether that could be good background for the audience. Like, we're obviously selecting a tomato that, I don't know, maybe it has to be as red as possible, because red kind of says it's delicious. And I know sometimes we select tomatoes based on how sweet it is. So you're selecting for these traits of tomatoes. It's artificial selection because or unblemished, whatever those dots are, So so you might want to talk about, Austin, as to what causes these traits, because artificial selection is humans taking what we want and progressing it to the offspring, if that kind of makes sense. So you might want to talk about what's causing these traits. I just wonder whether a bit of background there, Austin, you might want to maybe give a few minutes on, or I can. It's up to you.
Okay, I do have articles ready that are just kind of talking about that. So here, I will share a different tab instead. This is Evo 101, a great website, evolutionberkeley.edu. Great website, tons of stuff about evolution. And this is an article about artificial selection. And it starts off with the words, long before Darwin and Wallace, people were using selection to change the features of plants and animals. Farmers and breeders allowed only the plants and animals with desirable characteristics to reproduce, causing the evolution of farm stock. This process is called artificial selection because people, instead of nature, select which organisms get to reproduce. And I kind of have some issues with that language specifically, Ian. I think it's a little anthropomorphic to say that humans instead of nature are causing the selection, because humans are just another part of nature. I think it's a little arrogant to say that it's not just another form of natural selection. It's a specific form of natural selection. I think even
you're right. You're right, Austin. The distinction I make is, and I think the distinction the creationists will make is artificial selection is driven by intellect. So they'll say humans is part of nature, but it's intelligent. And I think that that's probably fair. So we are intelligently selecting for a trait, and we are expanding and making sure that that trait kind of, reappears in the offsprings kind of going forward, and artificially kind of expanding that, just going forward in time, right? Whereas nature doesn't, it's not intelligent. It's really around, when you have a cold climate, as I'm trying to put this in like Ken Hovind.
It selects differently. Nature only selects stuff that makes you survive better and stuff that makes you reproduce better. Those are the two main categories in natural selection versus artificial. In artificial selection, it's those two things, plus it's like color, sweetness, size of the kernels or the fruits or the berries or the buds or whatever. And they're kind of getting into this below a little bit in this article, like talking about how
I think the main distinction though is that we are the environment. So when you talk about natural selection, it's nature that's environment. So and I'll kind of speak this to any creationists who happen to be watching this in the future. And in other words, talking about it how Ken Hovind always describes it. When a dog goes to a cold climate, the dog with the long hair would survive more, and therefore you're going to see dogs with longer hair in the cold climates, whereas long hair is not going to be useful in the desert, and that's why you've got short hair. So that's nature, selecting the environment and the traits that would survive the environment. Artificial selection is we control the environment. So the reason why we would select any of these is because the environment is we want to have bigger flowers in a cauliflower because we want to eat that. So we will artificially create that environment by selecting for those traits. So the difference between artificial and natural to me is it's still the environment, but humans create the environment that we want. So we want mangoes. And I say mangoes, and to Hill Hugger, who's an Aussie, we're a mango season at the moment, and I love mangoes. We select mangoes that are the sweetest because humans want that. So we create that environment. So and that's the artificial part of it. So environment is what we create, and we select those traits for that. So that's the only difference that I kind of see anyway between natural and artificial.
Yes. So like if the mustard plant were to just survive in nature, it's fine where it is. There's not really an environmental pressure on it to evolve the way humans have evolved it for agricultural reasons by selecting specific mutants of this mustard plant that had bigger flowers or had bigger leaves or leaf buds.
How is this not, and I'm going to ask you, and it is rhetorical, how is this not a slam dunk evidence to creationists? Like, look at the mustard plant. A creationist would say, yes, but they never change outside its kind. Like look at a wolf becomes a dog, a fox, a coyote, and all that kind of stuff. And their example of why is because they use eyeball science. It looks the same. The wolf becomes a dog, becomes a coyote because they all look the same. Now, as a creationist, look at that. Look at the mustard plant, and then look at the kale, look at the cabbage, look at the cauliflower. They are completely different. Like, can't you see that this is pretty much macroevolution? It comes from the mustard plant, all right, but it's changed so much that you can't say a cabbage or a cauliflower looks exactly or looks even similar to the mustard plant.
It would be perverse to call a cabbage a flower. even though it technically is a flower. Yes. It would be perverse to call corn grass, even though it technically is grass.
Another good example is a vegetable and Ken Hovind. I mean, they're technically both vegetables, aren't they?
Oh man, Ian, I love it when you give a little jab.
He's not here. It's wasted when he's not here.
I had a thought about that today. Where when Ian says things, or sorry, now I am so sorry. I said your name when I was thinking about Kent Hovind. That's so rude of me to do that.
Should I take offense to that? Should I take offense to that?
I am really sorry. I'm so sorry, Ian. Please forgive me. When Ken says things like, "You think you're related to a mosquito? You think you're related to a bird or I wonder, do you think if I took a human cell and a bird cell and put them under a microscope and put their pictures right next to each other, do you think Kent could tell the difference between them? Because I don't think he would be able to. Because most animal cells actually just look very similar.
Yeah.
If you didn't already know that, microbiologically. If I took a bird blood cell and a human blood cell, I doubt he would be able to tell the difference.
You know what he'll say, though? He'll say a common designer, because they do the same thing. A blood cell, it's, the carry oxygen and stuff, it's the same thing. He'll just say, well, it's a common designer. They might be slightly different, but it all does the same job because, it's got a common function and God created that way. He'll say something stupid like that. So we can't make the connection that it looks the same because it came from a common ancestor. When you talk about the animal or the cell, he'll just say, well, they do the same thing because it's eyeball science. So it must be God because he created them the similar. So it's really hard to rebut someone that stupid.
It's amazing how well you've kind of put yourself into Kent's headspace, Ian. Maybe that's why I got confused there, because you really do understand.
This is strike two. You made the strike one before. This is strike two. You've only got a third chance, right? There's no way I'm sitting here being abused by you. Being told rock hard Ken over, right? So you've got one more strike, mate. One more strike.
I wasn't comparing you to him that time. I was saying that you've done a great job unraveling his skein of messed up stream of consciousness thinking. Like, you really got him pegged down. Yes, that is exactly how he would react. Yes, he would say, "Oh, you think you're related to this?" And you would say, "Look, these things look similar." And then he would say, "Oh, common designer." Yes, that is exactly how that interaction would go. You're almost prophetic with that.
So I've done a couple of debates with him now, 2, 3 maybe. And the reason why I enjoy debating him is he's so predictable. It's like I know what he's going to say, and I'll have a response to it if he says it. So that's the best thing about debating with him. He's so predictable.
It's always nice to be well prepared for a debate. It sucks to not be ready for a point and to be left there stumbling and going or having to look it up.
For debate number 2, Austin and Hovind, the rematch.
Yeah, I would be interested in doing it. I'm interested in taking debates on all kinds of scientific beliefs now, because I'm at the point now where I don't think I can do more damage than good. I really think it would be hard to make things worse than they currently are. So I'm willing to try. But yes,
do you want to go back on your video, or I know I did a bit of a segue, but
no, you're fine. Yes, let's continue watching what our friend has to say about tomatoes. We went on a nice little tangent there. I love tangents, and I embrace them. So by all means, tangent away. And share screen, and we're back to the tomatoes. Okay, tell us about artificial
tomatoes. Taste the same, but we tend to choose tomatoes that just look better. But where do their tomatoes come from?
They came from here on the farm. I brought both of our tomato options with me today because I need them for this illustration. And honestly, I just felt bad for this one. When the farmer needs to plant more tomato plants, which tomato should they choose seeds from? That's right, this one. The seeds inside of the tomato would produce lots of
Which is
tomato
holding those
plants.
tomatoes. Something else came to mind.
What?
Well, just the way she was holding those tomatoes like that, I just couldn't help myself.
Ian, control yourself. Behave.
I know. Yes, I'm by myself.
No, they are nice and juicy and round.
Well, and it's artificial selection right there, right? So
Yeah.
In turn would produce lots of tomatoes that hopefully would look like this one. The farmer would sell more tomatoes and in turn make more money.
Artificial selection is also called selective breeding. This is when humans select for desirable traits
Austin,
in plants or animals.
I'm not going to really be able to, I'm
Yes,
not going to be
this-
stopping a lot because everything she's saying is correct. Like, I'm not even sure what to comment except to say, yes, I agree. You picked the science video. It's obviously I'm not going to have any negative comments here, but everything she's saying is correct. I think it's a good introduction, but I'm just saying, I don't think I have a lot of like, let's stop here and have a discussion because I agree with everything she's saying so far.
No, I mean, the way we can add context is we can describe how this supports evolution. She's not really bothering to say that. She's just explaining how artificial selection works because she works in this field. She is
let it run.
An agriculturalist.
Yeah, definitely.
So I did have some things I was thinking about as she was talking there that I could have paused and talked about. But yeah, I one of the things I naively tried to do with my channel, Ian, when I was first starting out, was I was selling it as the efficient channel, the efficient but also comprehensive channel, and you really can't do both. So maybe I'll just be the comprehensive channel, I guess. But anyways, she's on to what is artificial selection.
Artificial selection is also called selective breeding. This is when humans select for desirable traits in plants or animals rather than allowing the species to evolve and change gradually without human interference.
So she is kind of, she just made a good point there that artificial selection, one of the reasons it's really good evidence for evolution is that it's a way more powerful and faster form of evolution. It tends to produce a visual effect much more quickly, like being able to tell the obvious wide difference between the mustard flower and all the different species that derive from it from artificial selection. You can hold up a mustard flower and a cauliflower in each hand and say, you know, are these the same species? And virtually nobody on the planet who doesn't already know, hasn't already been told that they are the same species, is going to say no.
That's actually a very good example. Like as I kind of said earlier, the mustard plant does not look anything like the cauliflower or even the kale, or it looks very different. And obviously they all came from the mustard plant. So to me, that's almost like macroevolution, because you're almost talking about different species there, right? Even though they have a common ancestor. I think what creationists always go to are like dogs, or they'll go to corn. Like I hear Ken over always talking about this. There's like 300 different species of corn in it, but it's still a corn. Or there's how many breeds of dogs, but it's still a dog. So they'll go through, and they'll call it adaptation. They'll call it like artificial selection is just, even though it's faster, it's all about adaptation. It's not evolution. Even though what we're actually looking at is evolution, just as you kind of said, Austin, speed it up. It's like hyper fast evolution that humans are controlling the environment for. But what I don't think creationists kind of think through is when they talk about the examples of a dog. So think about the Great Dane, right? So you've bred a massive dog, right? Or the Saint Bernard, massive dog. And then think about the Chihuahua, and then think about how those two are going to breed. Like, I don't even think it's possible. Forget artificial insemination. I don't think it's possible for a Great Dane and a Chihuahua to mate. Like if the Great Dane is the father, like how is that even possible? He's going to split the Chihuahua open. And if the Chihuahua is the father, then it's like how's it gonna get up there? It hasn't got a ladder, you know what I mean? So
this is hilarious because this is a point I have argued with several creationists for hours at a time, such that I finally just wrote up a chart for how the different possibilities of a large dog breed with a Chihuahua would go down. And I can break it down for you because I remember it so well now. The possibilities are I used a wolf instead of a Great Dane, but the logistics are virtually exactly the same. We're talking about
but you're almost talking about
with a really tiny Chihuahua.
But where I'm going to, Austin, is that is now sitting on the borderline of speciation. So they're both breeds of canine familiaris. Now they're both breeds of dogs, but it's to the point where you take those two extremes. they will not be able to naturally. They're not naturally fertile. They won't. You can't have offspring with them naturally. Yes, we can breed them artificially, but take humans out of the equation. You are now getting into speciation. A Chihuahua and a Great Dane has now pretty much on the borderline of becoming two separate species.
Yes. So this is how I broke it down. If you've got a female wolf and a male Chihuahua, and somehow the male is able to mount the female, you might be able
Could you maybe
to
expand on that for the audience a little bit, like how that's going to work, Austin? You know, just to give it a bit of color.
If the female is like high, or it's got like, you know, disabled mental faculties, there's some kind of issue with this hypothetical female wolf that's got her acting all kinds of crazy. So that the male Chihuahua can get up on her and mount her, you might be able to get some kind of hybrid that might make some sort of wolf Chihuahua thing. I think it's unlikely still. The logistics of it are still kind of tough, because I'm not sure that the baby matter injector is quite long enough. So we're not sure. But if that could happen, you might get some kind of Chihuahua wolf hybrid type thing. And the other scenario, if you're talking male wolf and female Chihuahua, there's absolutely no way that that's possible. The male will most likely kill the female. In the
offspring will be quite large, might even kill the mother coming out as well.
Exactly, yes. But I think in both scenarios, what's most likely to happen is the wolf just eats the Chihuahua. The wolf is not going to select the Chihuahua as a mate. It is going to view the Chihuahua as dinner. In most cases, a wolf will want a mate that's large, or roughly its size or larger than it, you know, something that's got a...
And to your point around me kind of knowing a little bit about how Ken Hovind thinks, like Ken Hovind always says, just let the animals decide for themselves what a species is. Like, to your point though, Austin, will a female wolf look at a Chihuahua and go, yep, that's who I want to mate with, or that's who I'm going to eat. You know what I mean? So, yes. You should bring that up to if you ever discuss it with Ken. I think it's a really strong point.
Yes, sexual selection. Reproductive isolation is not the only metric that shows speciation. Sexual selection is actually probably a more important one. In fact, from what I understand, many different arrays of species are virtually interfertile. Fox, wolves, and dogs can all interbreed. Polar bears, grizzly bears, panda bears, all the different kinds of bears can interbreed. But, you know, they don't mostly because of
I'm not sure
sexual selection. They do not view those different as compatible mates. They're looking for something that, you know, is more specific to their species. Generally, is how that works. A wolf will not view a Chihuahua as an ideal mate. A Chihuahua, if ever viewed as a mate by a wolf, would be viewed as a very subpar mate that it's only going to settle for if there's like really extreme and bizarre circumstances.
I reckon one of your evidence for evolution topics is you should probably go through all the different mechanisms for what evolution is. Like, I know we're talking about artificial selection, and as part of that, we kind of touched on the topic of natural selection. And natural selection is just one of the mechanisms, right? So, and you touched on a second one as well, sexual selection, I think you call it, but I think they call it non-random mating is one of the mechanisms for evolution. There's a whole bunch of other stuff as well, gene flow. I can't remember what they are. There's like 4 or 5 of them. So you should kind of go into that in some detail in some later episodes.
I think there's a ton of forces of evolution. It's just there's a couple that are bigger than others, and I think those are natural selection, heritable variation, gene flow hybridization, gene drift, random mutation, and I would say extinction is one of the big forces of evolution, but technically people don't include it because extinction can't select things. It can only eliminate things. But I still think elimination is a big part of evolution. So I consider it one of the driving forces. But yeah, that's a good point. We could do,
genetic drift is kind of, extinction could probably sit in genetic drift, right? So, I mean, that could be maybe a sub explanation for genetic drift, where you have a natural disaster or some sort of chance event that causes something to happen. In this case, it's causing a whole bunch of allele frequency to disappear from the population, so that could be your extinction. You could probably get Dr. Dan on, I think, because he had a really interesting discussion with Rock Hard Ken Hovind, where he basically asked Ken to talk about what other mechanisms for evolution. All Ken kind of knew was natural selection, and he forgot all the things that you indicated. He didn't even know any of that.
Had to give him natural selection.
Yeah, that's right. He had to give it to him. He didn't even know.
Yeah,
but that's
I remember that video.
Yeah. Anyway,
yes,
sorry.
Yes, we could do a video about that. And one that I would like to do, someone mentioned this once as their favorite evidence of evolution, the methods, the difference in the methods, the creationist method versus the scientific method. That's one I definitely would like to do an episode about. But let's hear more about tomatoes and plant evolution, because some people in the chat have pointed out quite rightly that yes, we talk mostly about animals when we're talking about evolution, and we tend to overlook the plants. And Scott Duke here asked this question: is there more plant biomass than animal biomass? And absolutely, it is hands down the plants. The plants have so much biomass. I think insects also have a lot of biomass. Both of these are correct. Yes, insect biomass and plant biomass well outweighs pretty much every other form of biomass on the planet. And yes, plants evolve quite quickly because of agriculture and artificial selection. There's many examples of plants evolving. And I think this might be one of the reasons creationists won't do debates about plants so much. I remember Kent Hovind doing a debate against a botanist, and I remember it being one of his worst debates. He took a thorough beatdown. Not that he doesn't usually take a thorough beatdown, but it wasn't an especially impressive thorough beatdown. But yes, plant evolution.
Talking about plants, Austin, it reminds me of, I think, another really stupid creationist. What's his name? It's that New Zealander guy. I forget his name. My memory is
Ray Comfort.
Yeah, Ray Comfort and his banana. So he talks about the end product artificially selected banana that we have today, and totally forgets about the wild banana, and what humans have selected as we see today as the Cavendish banana to where it used to be. So that I think one of
that was a hilarious gaffe. That was a very funny gaffe. To anybody who knew anything about agriculture and artificial selection, that was an obvious the rebuttal to that was so obvious that people were a little cautious about bringing it up at first when Ray Comfort started saying it, kind of like playing the lute on the city wall type thing. Like they were like, does he have some scathing rebuttal prepared for us when we point out the obvious? He must know this, right? He must know that. No, he did not know that the bananas you get in a marketplace are not the same as the bananas you find in a jungle or forest. It was so hilarious. Extremely funny. We literally just talked about that gaffe on, I think, the previous episode of this stream with Brock John Council, who had never heard of Ray. I think he had heard of Ray Comfort before, but he didn't know that particular fact about the banana. So it was really nice to share that with him. And we also made banana-based dick jokes for like an hour and a half after that. So that was fun. But yeah, let's continue on our artificial selection lesson here. We're almost through it. We're only a minute in.
Humans have selectively bred plants and animals for thousands of years.
Yeah.
The types of organisms that result from artificial selection are considered domesticated. In any population of species, there's variation of traits within that species. Artificial selection is when humans take matters into their own hands. They select which of the species get to reproduce and which ones don't, based on what traits they want the offspring to possess. So what are some examples of these desirable traits that we've been talking about? Well, the traits that could be selected for in animals might be the ability to have a higher yield, meat, eggs, milk, like these dairy cows, produce greater quantity of offspring, or produce better quality skin, fur
So cute.
or wool, run faster or carry more, be more resistant to disease.
Them being cute is one of the things we select for. Big
Yeah,
time,
especially dogs.
Ian.
Especially dogs.
That's the whole reason so many different breeds of dogs exist, because we're like, oh, look at this adorable little mutant. Let's breed
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I do have a comment on
And reach maturity fast.
Yeah, so what I was going to say, Austin, is
Yeah.
like all this 100% correct, right? So if I put my creationist hat on, though, don't just say, yeah, but this is basically adaptation. This is variation. The traits were already there, you know. And they'll usually go to the pepper moth example, and they'll go, there was always a white pepper moth and a black pepper moth. It's just that you pick the one that's black, but it was always there. All right. So I think the next step on this one on artificial selections is when you talk about genetically modified creatures or plants, where humans have actually, you know, taken a bacterial gene from let's say corn species or wheat species and artificially injected that into so they took it from corn that was resistant to a specific predator or bacteria, and they'll take that gene that they've artificially that caused that, and they'll artificially inseminate that into the corn. Sorry, they take it from corn into wheat, for example, so that they can make the wheat resistant to that particular bacteria. Now, that's new information. That's not a variation. That was something that wasn't there before, that humans took something and they'll inject that, and then they'll select for that trait, and they'll just breed the variation of the wheat that has become resistant to that particular bacteria. So I think we've got to take this artificial selection away from variation, because creation will just say, yeah, but that just proves that God created it and he created all these variations and you're just selecting the variation. You've got to get down to new information that's no longer there and how we've kind of taken that and expanded that and improved the species to how we want it going forward.
Well, I don't want to give the creationists the raw materials for the mindfuckery with which they will mindfuck us all, but I can put my creationist hat back on as well and say, what you're talking about, Ian, that's called gene therapy. Taking a gene and inserting it into a genome using like high level micro injection techniques. That's called gene therapy, and that is a real thing that people do. But guess what? That requires intelligence. So intelligent design is the way that's just intelligent design.
Ha-ha. Yeah, no, and that's right. The way we've done it is intelligently designed, but what it does show is that if there was a mutation that caused that naturally, then 100% you've now got new information. And we have many examples about gene duplication. So when you have a gene duplication, that new creature or new plant still does the same thing the old one does. It just has a second gene that does it again. Now, if the second gene has further mutations that then causes it to do something else, you've now got a new plant that still does what the original does, but it can do more because that gene duplication that has undergone mutation does something different as well. That's an example of new information. That's an example of how, you know, you can kind of combat the creationist answers around, we've never seen examples of new information. Well, that example does exist. We've seen that happen today. Now, what we've done is we've artificially created that new mutation, but there is lots of examples where we've seen gene duplication occur, and the second duplicated gene has undergone a mutation that now does something else as well. And I think that's the example of the Lenski long-term experiment, where the second mutation not just consumes the sugar, but they've had a gene duplication that also allows it to also consume nihilase as well. So it does consume both. So that's new information. You can't argue that. That's something that did not appear before. That's now appeared. That new bacteria can do both. It's got to be new information. How can you argue that it's not?
Ian, they just say it's not. They just say, no, that's not new information. I've had this argument with many creationists, and yeah, so the whole issue is that argument, it's kind of nonsensical. When you press creationists on what do you mean by new information, it doesn't seem like anything reasonable ever gets put there. Like, are we talking about a new, bigger genome? Are we talking about a different set of sequences? Whatever example of a reasonable definition you can get them to accept for new information, there's dozens of examples of it. And then they just say, well, that's not, they come up with the goalposts. They just move the goalposts every time you give them an example of something that would qualify as new genetic information. I think every single organism that's born qualifies as new genetic information. Is a gene pool or a species genome that has one more organism in it more complex than a collective genome of a species that has one less? Yes, even just by that degree of one, yes, it is more complex. But I understand what you're saying about, yes, that is a tough argument to respond to with creationists, because they're so evasive about what they mean by new information. And if you can get a specific definition out of them and you provide an example of the definition they agreed to, they just move the goalposts again, in my experience. So I don't know how you would deal with that, but I would probably just acknowledge, well, you're moving the goalposts. So I think you're just
the
not.
way I deal with it is probably not as effective as you. I just mock them and call them stupid. That's all. But not exactly efficient, nor kind of appropriate. But I think each to their own.
No, there's a time and a place for that, for sure. All right, continuing on. Tell us more, gardener lady, about chickens.
Like chickens being able to lay eggs faster. Selected traits in plants could be individuals that give a high yield, which means produce a lot of the edible part of the plant, are resistant to disease and pests, do not bend or snap in the wind, are frost or drought tolerant, or have a better flavor or appearance.
So the resistance to disease and pests, that's a huge one. So that's that. Are you familiar with agriculture, Ian? Have you ever studied agriculture a little bit?
I've never studied it, and probably the examples I know are just bits and pieces I've gleaned here and there. So not an expert by far.
So there's big issues with agriculture because we have lots of pests and we use lots of pesticides. And it turns out pesticides are really freaking bad in a lot of ways. But primarily because of something called biological concentration. That was the term I learned it by back in school. But it's basically the phenomena wherein concentrations of toxic elements increase as you go up the trophic levels. You've got DDT in the water and the fish drink the water. So then you've got DDT in the fish, and then the bird eats fish. So you got DDT in the bird, and then we eat the bird. And the bird has a much higher concentration of DDT in it than it did at the lower trophic levels. So now it makes us really sick. In fact, it's enough DDT that, it kills us, or it causes us to have birth defects or other such things. So being able to create organisms that are naturally resistant to pests so that we don't have to use those pesticides, that's a huge thing. That is huge for public health and safety. That's huge for economics. That's huge for marketing. Like it's huge for people's trust in established foundations. Like that's really important. This is why we gotta resist people who mislead people about evolution, because we need people learning this stuff and studying it and making strides in it to better society. Little tangent there. Sorry. Some examples.
All the different dog breeds that you could possibly think of are all one species. They all look so different, but because they're one species means that if you have a male and a female dog, any two, in theory, could reproduce and produce viable offspring.
The majority of the animals that you would see here on the farm are a product of artificial selection. Like these chickens. Wild chickens look like this, while chickens on the farm look like this. If you're still
did you see the pictures of the wild chickens there, Ian?
Yep.
Yeah, they're way skinnier than those farm bred chickens.
But mate, you just fry them, 11 secret herbs and spices, and they'll just be as tasty.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Well, probably not, actually. I would bet that wild chicken is pretty gamey.
Oh, you're probably right. It's probably tougher. No, you're probably right.
Yeah.
It's like it's
Here,
lacking those
liking this
delicious
video, you can
hormones.
show your support
Yeah, well, yeah, and all those yummy antibiotics. Yeah.
Yes.
by hitting that like button, and most importantly, please subscribe.
There might be wild variants of these different fruits and vegetables, but over thousands
Corn
of
is
years
corn
of
is another
human
good one, Austin. Have you seen the
every
wild corn? Have you seen what the wild corn
Yes.
actually looks like compared to what you have now? That's another good example of
Yes.
the banana example we had talked about earlier.
Yes, it's a species of wild grass called teosinte that's
Yes, that's
it's
it.
mildly edible, seedy kind of
Like
kind of
literally this small. The
like
corn,
yes,
the corn part of it was this small compared to the massive ones you get today, but it's like
yes.
originally this small.
I think she just showed a picture of some of the different stages of artificial selection, but you can like go to just Google and look it up, and there is teosinte in the wild still today, and you can definitely see the difference, the impact that artificial selection has had on the populations of teosinte that became the modern corn we're growing today.
Yep.
generation of crop would have been selected for the plants that have had the best yield or tasted the best. We eventually ended up with the domesticated crops we see today. One of the craziest examples of this is the wild mustard plant. This plant
Yeah.
has
There you
been
go.
domesticated
There you
several
go.
times throughout history in several different places and has given us several different vegetables we eat today. The flower buds and stem have been selectively bred and are now broccoli and cauliflower. The leaf buds
That's right.
Yes, the flower buds are that. So they probably didn't know this when they were diversifying them because it took a while. But now we do know. You can go straight into the genome of these organisms. We've got full sequences of many species genomes now, thanks to the Genome Sequencing Project, and we can isolate the exact sequences that made it so that the flower buds and stems grew bigger so that we could get broccoli and cauliflower. And now we can mess with that directly using gene therapy techniques. The good old gene therapy rears its head again there. I'm glad we're getting the specific parts and like how it happened, because she's probably going to go over all of them.
bud is now cabbage or Brussels sprouts,
Yes.
and the leaves are now
Kale.
all
Yes.
from the same wild plant.
Artificial
Yep, exactly.
selection, when done right,
And it goes even further than that. There's like 160 different species of broccoli. Just and so
that many.
technically,
Wow. Okay.
all of that is just a different species of mustard flower. There's even more than just the kale and all that. There's also kohlrabi. There's like 12 other species. Every one of these different species diversifies into 20 plus different. It's literally thousands of species that are all technically the mustard plant. It's so much evolution. It's perverse to look at it all and not accept it for what it is. That's one of the reasons it's really strong evidence of evolution. I'm glad
I'll
we're doing
tell you
the
another
whole
reason,
thing.
because if you're a smart and you show this to Ken, he'll just go, well, was it cauliflower you're saying? Was it 160 species of cauliflower you were saying? Yeah, he'll go,
Broccoli.
yes. Broccoli. He'll go, yes, but there's still broccoli. And then what you'll then say is, yes, but go back in time and look at the mustard plant and just go, is this still a mustard plant? I mean, of course it is, because we never grow out of our phylogeny, right? But to Kent, using his eyeball science, he'll have like a disconnect, because he'll say, when you talk about 160 species of broccoli, he'll say, yes, but it's still broccoli. And then when you take it back in the time, you kind of go, mustard plant, broccoli, they look so dissimilar. You have to agree that there's a common ancestor that doesn't have to look like what their ancestors are. Does that make sense? And then you kind of, the natural kind of flow onto that thinking is, well, common ancestor to any animal, like the common ancestor of a bear, a dog, a seal. It won't look like a bear, it won't look like a dog, it won't look like a seal, but there is a common ancestor, and then that kind of breaks this whole definition of kinds. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just I don't even know.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I think it's just the classic case of creationists. So they have a dogmatic position. They're not going to, which is useful in a debate. If you are like trying to score points, you can sometimes take a dogmatic position, but it's not very useful in terms of like, doing good reality testing. having good, solid knowledge
I think what I'm
about
trying
the
to say is
world around you.
you can use that dogmatic position. So if you approached it with Ken and just talked about broccoli, and you say, well, there's 160 different species of broccoli, he will 100% say yes, but there are still broccoli, right? And then if you then go, yes, but the broccoli came from a mustard plant, and you show what a broccoli looks like, and you show what the mustard plant looks like, and it looks totally different, I don't think he'll have a response to that because it looks different. Whereas he'll just say broccoli looks like a broccoli.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's why I think it's a
I'm
good example.
curious now. I'm about to look this up live. Let's do some live looking up. Can you crossbreed broccoli and mustard plants or flowers? Broccoli and mustard flower. I would assume yes. Yes, you can crossbreed broccoli and mustard flower. So what does a broccoli mustard flower hybrid look like? I'm really curious about that.
That is interesting. Show us.
Mustard flower hybrid. I'm looking that up right now. Seeing if I can get a picture.
Got me curious as well.
Oh, look at this. Is this it? I think this might be it here, Ian. Look, because the stem is so much bigger. It looks kind of like broccoli.
But you've got a lot
and
of
then the
flowers.
tip of it is like, yeah. Whoa, okay. That's trippy. So, but that is evidence too that yes, the broccoli is descended from the mustard flower. So that they not only do they look so morphologically different that virtually nobody will say yes if you hold them up and say, are these the same species? You can prove their common ancestry by the fact that you can still cross hybridize them. That's so freaking cool. That's awesome.
Well, the different species, it takes artificial selection to cross hybridize them. They wouldn't do it naturally. I wouldn't assume. Yeah.
Yes. I would think that would be the way you would do it, Ian. I don't think you would be able to make it happen naturally. You would have to artificially do so, but it is possible to. So that's proof the common ancestry, and then how different they look is proof of the macroevolution. It's such good evidence for evolution. Why can't they accept it, Ian? Why can't they?
So what I like to say to people, Austin, is like, look around the world, right? If you look around, look at all the people around the world, and just never forget that 50% of the people you see are below average intelligence, and those are all the creationists. Everyone above that are all the evolutionists. 50% of everyone that you see have below average intelligence, and they're the creationists. That's why. So that's my response to your question, Austin.
And you know what? It really cooks my noodle because there are a couple of them that have some science degrees, like Kurt
Dr. James
Wise, Todd Wood.
Yeah.
Gosh,
well, you see, Austin, there are. I think the key point is, yes, there are creationists that have PhDs in the relevant science. You've got like Dr. Jensen, Dr. Sanford. So they do. I think who was the other guy that Dr. Dan. Are
you talking about Cordova?
Yeah. So they do have it, but
really
you
want to include him
you have to really think about who they are. You know what I mean? Also,
yeah.
You're thinking like who because there's only a handful of them. Like whereas there are tens of thousands of non-young Earth creationist PhDs that we can come out with. Whereas you have to sit there and kind of go, what are their names again? Because there's just so few of them.
Yeah. I've had this argument with creationists before, and one of them posted a link once to an Answers in Genesis page that's like all of our creationist scientists, and I went through the list, and like 30 of the names of the list are long dead, and then for everybody who's alive on the list, it's like the 4 people we've already named, Jensen, Behe, Wood, Wise, and then they just started scraping the bottom of the barrel. They're like a lawyer creationist, radio host creationist. It's
An
like,
engineer.
who cares about these that's not a scientist. One of them they put on there was a weightlifter. I was like, come on.
There is an actual, like, I can't, there's a name for it, and I can't recall what the name is, but it's someone that noticed that a lot of creationists were actually engineers, and they've actually they kind of gave a name to that kind of phenomenon. Like if you're an engineer, you obviously see things that are created, and you just assume that that everything is obviously created, right? But there's a high percentage of engineers who are, for some reason, young earthers.
I think Dr. Dan likes to call it engineer brain. Is that the term you're thinking of?
No, there's an actual. It's been noticed like decades ago. Like there's an actual name for it as well. If it comes to me,
there was a video where they were talking about an engineer who was a young Earth creationist. I think it was on Erica's channel, and Dan popped on and he started talking, and Erica, before they continued on, was like, Dan, wait, before we continue on, what do you think this guy's field in? And Dan was like, oh, this guy's an engineer for sure. He called it 100%. Yes, I know what you're talking about. I didn't know there was an older term for it. Maybe is it a term? Is it a kind of bias? Maybe
it's like how they've got, how people say there's Godfrey's law, that there's some sort of name for it on I look, if it comes to me, I'll mention it. It's just tip of my brain.
Please do. Yeah. All right, we're almost done with this video here, so let's finish her off.
Right, is amazing and tasty. You should really look into the story of the watermelon.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah,
she was just, wrapping up with the watermelon there. So, yes, I think artificial selection is some very powerful evidence of evolution.
Yeah,
I think we would be hard pressed to comprehensively cover just how well artificial selection supports evolution, unless we were going to spend all night here.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I kind of my head kind of moves to what the creationist rebuttal will be, and which is really, well, artificial selection is just selecting traits that were already there. You're not going to get any new information. And they generally just say it's variation within the species. That example that you pull up around the mustard plant, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, all that kind of stuff is actually a very good example of where it's clearly not within the species. It's changed so much that it looks so different. They don't talk about it normally, but they always go down to dog breeds. And then we talked about, well, what about Chihuahua and a Great Dane? It's getting to the point where it's probably going to be speciation there as well, right? So you've got to attack the argument that the creationists will kind of go to, which is this is just variation within the species. Of course, that's going to happen, and it takes intellect to select for it. So I think you've done a really good job to show why artificial selection is just within what's accepted within evolution. It's just a speeded up way of humans using their intellect to kind of select the environment for it. That's all good, but the creationists will go to the yes, A, it takes intelligence to do it, and B, it's just variation within the species. So yeah, we need to attack those specific points, I think.
Yeah, we can do that if we want to take a minute to. I think immediately one of the good points you can attack with this, the whole new information. Corn is a great example of that, because you know what teosinte doesn't have? It doesn't have a cob. The entire gene sequence that builds a cob in corn, that's completely new.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. Well, that's interesting. I've seen old, like really old. What's the cob of a corn? Maybe I'm getting confused. What is the cob of corn?
So we know the 5 sequences that we manipulated mostly to make teosinte into corn. And those are the sequences that control color, the softness of the seeds, the aroma, the sweetness, and the size. And the cob was a completely novel set of genes that we didn't actually control for with any of those factors. The cob ended up being produced as a compensation for the weight that the increased size of the kernels put on the stalk of the plant. It was nature.
I think the pictures I've seen of old corn was just a very, very small cob. Like it was just a lot very grassy with a cob this small and very small kernels. And I just assume you bred that to be bigger. But you're saying that even before that there wasn't even a cob. So that's interesting. I didn't know that.
There was no cob.
That has to be new. Well, that's clearly new information then. That in my mind, how can you argue that's not
100%.
new? It's not there before. Now it's there, and now it's bigger. It's got to be new information, right?
I have brought it up to creationists, and they will just say, no, that still doesn't count. That's not new information. That the information to create the cob was already in the genome.
Yeah, but you're talking to creationist. The creationist has a goalpost which they've just fastened on a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And essentially you give them information, they just light the rocket ship, and the rocket ship just blasts the goalpost somewhere else until it's like so bloody far away you can't even hit it. So that's a typical creationist response. What's new?
Yep. I think most of their rebuttals to artificial selection are really weak and limp. You almost don't even have to bother refuting them. I mean, you can call it intelligent design. You can call it adaptation. It doesn't really matter to me. It's an adaptation that's really visual. It's one that you can see. Like the creationists like to say, when have you ever seen evolution? When have you ever seen something evolve into something else? And the answer is in agriculture all the time. We've seen it happen a lot, you know?
Yep. What would be also really good is we spend a bit of time thinking about, so plants is a good one. Like I say many times, and you've heard me say it many times today, the mustard seed one, the mustard plant one's a really good example. Because creationists don't really consider plants as, alive. They always call, what do you bring on Noah's Ark? It's animals with the breath of life. That's what they kind of consider as proper life. That, we need to think about artificial selection in that context with animals. And I think the example we talked about today, which is a good one, is the dogs. So they all 100% agree that there's artificial selection happening that gives us all the breeds of dogs. But if you take the two extreme that we talked about around Great Danes and Chihuahuas, it's to the point where if you let them go naturally, it's got to be speciation because they're not going to breed together, right? So that's where you got to give them an example where they consider something that that fits in their worldview, because I don't think they consider plants as alive.
Plants are really tough for them, Ian, because plants mean specific things for the scripture that are really tough for the creationists to wrestle with. Like, Ian, I know you've probably read Genesis a couple of times just for your debates with Kent. You might remember it says something about nothing died in the garden. Well, what did people eat? They ate plants. So that is where the plants.
They'll say plants aren't alive because it doesn't have the breath of life. They'll say, no, plants aren't alive because they don't have the breath of life. So you can kill them all you want because they don't have the breath of life. So this is why I think it's really good. Like the example around the mustard plant's great, but the creationists will say, well, that's not really life, is it? So we've got to come up with an example that's animals.
But even that doesn't work, Ian, because plants absolutely do respirate. They do take it. They do have the breath of life.
Very sciencey. I'm a creationist. I don't understand science. It's too sciencey, Austin. They don't have a nostril. They don't have a mouth, so it's not alive. Literally. Sometimes when I argue with the creationists, I need to dumb things down so low so that they understand it, and then give them examples that they understand.
So then insects don't have the breath of life either because they don't breathe through a mouth or through lungs. They breathe through miracles on their
and I have heard creationists. I've heard Kent flip-flop on this. Like he has said that you don't need to have insects on the ark because insects can be on these floating mat because they're not technically alive because they don't have the breath of life because they breathe through their skin, right, or exoskeleton. And the only reason why we have insects today is because they were floating on these floating mass of vegetation outside the ark, right? Then I have heard him say, oh no, there were insects because God's asked for creeping things to be also brought on the ark. So I've heard creationists flip-flop on both of them because they can't really define what an insect or what a creeping thing is. It's
And then they'll flip-flop again when you remind them that several species of insects are xylophages, species of animals that eat wood. So if your ark is made of wood, that looks like dinner to them, and all they need to do is eat a hole big enough for water to leak in, and that sinks your whole ark. I mean, there's even species of xylophages that are bigger, like beavers. I bet you didn't know some species of elephants are xylophages and can eat wood. So that's one thing I thought about recently about the ark, that what did they do with the xylophages? You know, they'll have to come up with something for that.
Our pastors and priests also xylophages as well? Because they, from what I understand, they really enjoy eating wood. Just saying.
No, Ian, you did not just go there. Oh, no, but you know, it is actually kind of interesting, Ian. Wood is an incredible resource. It's got a buttload of calories in it. That's why it's so good for starting fires. So you would think more species would eat wood than actually do, but the issue is that its chemical composition is high on cellulose, which is a chemical that's very difficult for most species to digest. You have to have specific enzymes to be able to, you know, decompose the cellulose to get at the yummy calories at the center of it. So that's why most species aren't xylophages, even though it's a great source of calories. But there are enough of them that it would cause a problem on the ark, I think. And it's one that people don't talk about a lot. So maybe I should think about that more, do some writing and, you know, maybe do some math and see, you know, how many different species they are and how much a pair or 7 pairs of each would eat, and do some math, how much of that gopher would. Because I assume if it's good enough for gophers, it'd be good enough for all the other species, since we don't know what gopher wood is still. Ugh.
So it must be gopher wood is wood that gophers like.
Yeah, that's what I would guess, but maybe it's magic god wood that's super powerful and repels radiation and heat, so they don't have to deal with the heat problem anymore. Or wait, no, Donnie already solved that.
Didn't he just admit it was a miracle? Like,
yes, that's how they solved it.
Yeah, it was just a miracle. No, I think he said, I can't remember what it was. I think it was him or that 40-year-old version. What's his name, Sam? I think
all the same old answers.
Well, I think the outcome was it was a miracle, but they didn't explicitly say it. I think what they said was, well, yes, there was accelerated. Yes, there's accelerated heat decay, but we're still here today, so it mustn't have been a problem. So I think, in other words, it's a miracle, but they didn't say it. But they said, oh, there was accelerated radioactive decay. We're still here today, so it wasn't a problem. Ergo, it was a miracle, but they didn't say it. But the conclusion, it was a miracle. So.
The answer is there's no heat problem because the universe is billions of years old, and that heat displacement happened at a rate that's virtually negligible. But anyways, yeah. No, do we have any more points that we absolutely want to add on artificial selection before we finish this one up? Is there anybody in the chat?
It was really good. I think then your next one would be, you know, maybe how a creationist would take what we've just said and rebut it, and then rebut that basically. And I think to the point around that we've talked through quite extensively is take it to animals, and then just like take it to macroevolution, like, you know, like the example of the mustard plant to an animal version of that, because they'll just discount all the plant stuff and go, that's not alive. That's you know, that doesn't have the breath of life. What's an animal? And I think the example on the Great Dane and the Chihuahuas is a good example. I mean, they can't rebut that, right? You've got 2 breeds that are now to the point where they can't naturally reproduce, and by definition, if you let them be, they're not gonna. It's got to be 2 different species.
Yeah, that is exactly what the species concept describes, pretty much to a T. Yeah. So we'll see if any creationists watch this and comment what a creationist response would be. I think we already kind of know what they would be. You know, we've covered it. You know, that was already in its genes. There's no new gene information. That's just adaptation, not evolution. All the typical, you know, classical stuff that we hear from Kent and Ken and all the big ones that, you know, the little ones just kind of follow and repeat.
Let us know when you have your second debate. I'll be the first one there watching it.
All right. Yeah, I will. Yeah. I've been in talks with Donnie about it, so we'll hear what he says. I'll let you guys know.
Beautiful.
Is there anything else we want to get to before we close it out? Because I think we're
looking forward to number 6, the episode 6 on the series. Looking forward to that one. Yeah.
I need to come up with some kind of... Oh, you know what? I just remembered. I do have 2 more things. The first thing is I'm thinking about changing the name of my channel.
Okay, for what?
Creationism super thesis guy. It's too niche. It's too specific. Nobody remembers it. It's not catchy enough. So I made a poll on my page. The two options I'm thinking about changing it to are either Skeptic Simeon or the Godless Gorilla. And so far, I think currently the Godless Gorilla is winning. So guys, go on my page, make a vote, make a comment, come up with your own ideas. But I'm thinking I'm going to change my channel name at some point. And then what was the other? Oh man, I said there were two things, but that was the first thing. Oh, awesome hair guy. Thanks, Maya. Oh, Maya's great. Are you subscribed to Maya, Ian? Have you checked out Bad Science Sunday or her channel at all?
If I'm not, I'll rectify that problem. That's a
great.
lack of foresight is Maya. So,
oh yeah, and then the other thing I need to come up with a sign off. I need to come up with a good catchy sign off for my show because everybody else has a good sign off.
What about see you later? I can't remember what her sign off is. My gentle and modern apes. That's one.
Yes, Erica's is great. I want one that's
my fellow intelligent simian, or if you're going to go with that, or my fellow godless gorillas, or I don't know.
Good night, fellow primates.
Work in progress, guys. Work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress. We'll figure it out. Right. Put some comments on my poll for. I'll make a poll for a sign off too, I guess.
Maya, I do. I've seen you like on many different YouTube channels and stuff. I even know what you look like because I've seen you like on the live streams as well. With like I said earlier, I'm bad with names. Who's that guy?
I've done a lot with Mark Reed. I've done a couple.
Yeah, I know you with Mark Reed.
Mike over at.
Maya has a co-host as well. The name escapes me. I think he's a physicist. Is he, or geologist?
My channel name did used to be just Austin Sims. That was my channel name for a while, but I wanted to make it
pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool.
Maybe I'll just change it back to that. I don't know. Vote in the poll. I kind of like the Godless Gorilla. I like Skeptic Simeon. Both of those sound good. But yeah, whatever. So got to come up with maybe change the channel name, come up with a catchy sound off or sign off phrase. That's all I got. Thanks for coming by. I love that you're willing to do these streams with me because, yeah, like I said,
I enjoy them. I definitely enjoy them, mate. So it's
me too.
Thanks for the invite. Not that. Thank you for the invite. I do enjoy them.
Yeah. Not a lot of people care about this stuff that much, but I love it. I think it's super fascinating. So I love having people who are willing to talk with me about it. So thank you, Ian. Thank you all the fine people in the chat. Science and rationalism bless you. You guys have a great night. Thanks for stopping by and listening to us blather on about artificial selection for a little over an hour.
Thanks, Austin.